So I took a trip down south to Birmingham, Alabama to cover the Wilder versus Areola fight. And while I was there, I had to visit the best and the biggest civil rights museum in the country. Matter of fact, right across the street from the museum sits the very famous 16th Street Baptist Church that was infamously bombed, where 4 young black schoolgirls lost their lives. So there was a lot of history in this museum and in the area. So I wanted to share the experience with you guys. Go ahead and check it out. I hope you guys enjoy it. All right, Dante's Boxing Nation out here in Alabama. We are at the Birmingham Museum Institute, the Civil Rights Institute. We're about to go ahead and check it out, see what they have in here, what type of historical things they have in here.
The way you all are going to start your tour, you're going to watch an 8-minute film, and you're welcome to take pictures. Just make sure that the flash is off.
Okay.
And if you want to sign in before or after your tour, you can. And the restrooms are you just keep straight and just make a right, and you should see the restroom.
Please start your visit straight ahead.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us, and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
That's the order of the courts, and that's the way it ought to work.
Separate, but
Separate is equal.
Separate is never.
We are set public school system completely back for we'll let our children go to school with the names. I'm not prejudiced. I think everybody ought to have 2 or 3 of them.
I'm not prejudiced. I'm not prejudiced.
What?
What we're talking about here is a grand lie.
The next thing you know, they'll have the NAACP on the back, and then what are they going to do?
Am I afraid of the Ku Klux Klan? Of course I'm afraid.
I agree with Dr. King. We will match their capacity to inflict suffering without a capacity to endure suffering. We will meet their physical force with soul force.
You look cross-eyed at the wrong person around here. You get yourself an enemy.
The Negro is only one step up from a chimpanzee.
By the late 19th century, segregation of blacks and whites had become an entrenched way of life in the South. In December 1960, another Supreme Court ruling declared segregated restrooms, restaurants, and waiting rooms for interstate bus, train, and plane passengers unconstitutional. 5 months later, that law would be severely tested by Freedom Riders. The Freedom Rides were organized by James Farmer, director of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, a civil rights organization rooted in the philosophy of nonviolence. Farmer, who would be arrested with other Freedom Riders, launched the movement to draw attention to the lack of enforcement of recent civil rights court decisions and legislation. As Farmer's volunteers rode into the South, the campaign gained support from civil rights leaders like Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King Jr. When the riders arrived in Atlanta, King praised them for their nonviolent, direct action, but he warned of trouble ahead. "You'll never make it through Alabama," he predicted. Activist John Lewis, now a congressman from Georgia, was then a 21-year-old divinity student. He was the first of the Freedom Riders to be attacked when he and a fellow white rider tried to enter a whites-only waiting room at a Greyhound terminal in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Traveling deeper into the South, to Mississippi and Alabama, singing spirituals and freedom songs, the riders were met with hostility, arrest, and more violence. One of the most frightening attacks occurred a few miles outside Anniston, Alabama, on May 14, 1961. A Greyhound bus carrying Freedom Riders was forced off the road by a white mob who stoned and firebombed the bus. The passengers barely escaped the burning vehicle. That same day, several of the Freedom Riders arriving at the Trailways bus depot in Birmingham suffered savage and bloody assaults. Among several beaten by the Ku Klux Klan was 61-year-old Walter Bergman, a college professor from Detroit. Undaunted, he urged others to join the cause and strike while the iron is hot. His fellow rider, Reverend B. Elton Cox, an outspoken minister from North Carolina, also remained defiant, saying he preferred death to segregation. Jim Swerg, a 21-year-old studying to be a congregational minister, was the victim of an ambush attack a week later at the Greyhound bus station in Montgomery, Alabama. Screaming, "Nigger lover," the mob pummeled him, fracturing his teeth and injuring his back. Trained in nonviolence, like his co-riders, he never struck back. As the vicious attacks on the Freedom Riders continued, the National Guard was called out. When hundreds of supporters of the Freedom Rides assembled at Montgomery's First Baptist Church with Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders, an angry mob gathered outside. The National Guard patrolled the besieged church during the long, tense night. At times, however, Lewis recalled, the guards, with their bayoneted rifles, looked like the enemy. With their presence, the violence was quelled, but hostility awaited the riders as they arrived in Jackson. When black riders tried to enter a white waiting room, or white riders tried to use facilities designated for blacks, local police officers ordered them out. If the riders refused to leave, they were immediately arrested and charged with breach of peace.
Riders ran into a major melee in Birmingham itself. As we got off the bus, we decided to proceed with our plan. As we entered the waiting room, the men who were lying around the wall came toward us. Then they took me and forced me out the door and threw me into the crowd. And I was beaten by one big guy and seven others.
So this right here is the bus that was bombed. This right here is exactly where Martin Luther King sat in solitary confinement. It's ironic when you look at these pictures back in 1963 and we see police brutality exacted damn near the same way today.
there is police brutality. People of color have been targeted by police, so that's a large part of it, and they're government officials. They're put in place by the government, so that's something that this country has to change. There's things we can do to hold them more accountable, make those standards higher. You have people that practice law and are lawyers and go to school for 8 years, but you can become a cop in 6 months and don't have to have the same amount of training as a cosmetologist. That's insane. I mean, someone that's holding a curling iron has more education and more training than people that have a gun and are going out on the street to protect us.
Alright you guys, so yesterday I made a post in relation to the killing of Terrence CRUTCHER, saying that Black Lives Matter, saying that this is the reason that Colin Kaepernick is protesting, saying that this must stop, and some of y'all lost your minds. One guy told me to shut the fuck up because I never say anything when a black guy kills another black guy, and nobody protests black on black crime. Well, first of all, that's not true. People do protest black on black crime. It happens. Google it. The media just doesn't publicize it as much. Second of all, black on black crime isn't a thing. Nobody ever says Mexican on Mexican crime, Asian on Asian crime, white on white crime. Third of all, you cannot equate a civilian murdering another civilian, and that civilian being charged with murder, serving their time for that murder, to a paid government official who was paid to protect and serve, killing an innocent civilian in an unjustifiable fashion, and being put on paid administrative leave, because that is exactly what happened yesterday.
Message!